So last week there was a shir about the halachos of the 3 weeks, and someone registered a complaint, which there's two aspects to the complaint. First of all, why are we going through all these negative halachos associated with gullahs, and when we know that already Mashiach is already here, and we're standing on the threshold of Geulah? And the second aspect of the questions, of course, obviously we have to keep what it says in Shulchan Aruch, but why don't we wait until it's mamash negay instead of saying it in advance, because it's probably not going to be relevant. It's a legitimate complaint. I wish more people would make such kind of complaints. So it just reminds me of something interesting, that the Rebbe actually once asked the question, how is it that we keep the halachas associated with the 3 weeks if we know that Mashiach is coming very, very soon? Because the 3 weeks are because there's going to be a Tishrov, but we don't believe there's going to be a Tishrov this year. Maybe there won't be a week of Tishrov, maybe there won't be the 9 days. Maybe we don't have to keep how do we keep the 3 weeks right now? And the Rebbe explained that Pinigla, that there's a Ragachaver that writes in a number of places based on the Gemara and Sukkah. The Gemara and Sukkah says that Chazal made a rule, a Gzeiras Tikra, made a rule that you can't use schach, boards that are wide, more than a certain dimension, 4 tfachim, because you might just think that if I could use these kind of boards, I might as well sit in my house. And you want to understand the difference, that this was done l'shem sukkah, this is not l'shem sukkah. But the halacha is that even if you have boards that are wide 4 tfachim, but you twisted them on the side, and now on the side it's narrower, you still can use it. Explains the Ragachaver, because once the thing receives an isser, the Isser applies whether the reason isn't there or not there. It becomes an Isser Atzmi, to use the Ragachaver language. And the Rebbe brings this principle many, many times. So the Rebbe says in this case also, the reason for the 3 weeks is because of Tishrov. But once there's a reason for Tishrov, the 3 weeks retain their own identity. Obviously during Golus we're talking about it. So as soon as Mashiach is going to come, it's going to change. But so long we're in Golus, even if Mashiach is going to come, and in Mitzvah Shem he will come, in the next moment, but at this moment, it retains its own identity. That was the explanation the Rebbe once gave. So it's good for the Rebbe, it's good for us. But it reminded me of something else, that it was a Fabrengen the Rebbe held. The Rebbe a few times held Fabrengens on Erev Rosh Chodesh Av. Tonight is Erev Rosh Chodesh Av. On one occasion, the Rebbe said that he was looking very hard, because of Gemutshit or Gemattert, I worked very hard to find a heter that I could Fabreng tonight. 3 weeks, make a Fabrengen. And the Rebbe said, I found a very good heter, and I don't need anything better than that. That the halach is that professional musicians that are doing this for their parnasa, allowed to play instruments for parnasa reasons. There's restrictions to that, but that's the general principle. So the Rebbe said, I fabreng as a profession. That's my profession, this is my parnasa. That's my heter to do it tonight. I think it was at that fabrengen, it was at that fabrengen where the Rebbe said, that I waited till the very, very last moment. Now, I don't want to talk about the 9 days too much in advance. People will start being miyayish menagula, they'll despair of Mashiach coming. So I waited till it's Erev Rosh Chodesh Av, the night of Erev Rosh Chodesh. I can't wait longer, because these are things that people need to know before the 9 days begin. The purpose of that Fabreng was to inspire people to do things to transform Galus and bring Geula before the 9 days begin. So here we're also in the very, very last moment. It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Av. The Eibishter is Magdim Refu L'Maka. The Eibishter gives us always the cure before the wound. And we have to follow in the ways of Hashem. Before the Makkah, before the wound of the 9 days begin, we already start before the 9 days thinking how we're going to do this in the best way, that it should get rid of the entire Gullus, which the basic way for that is by increasing in Torah and Tzedakah, particularly Barabim, resolving already now that during the 9 days we're going to make a lot of siyumim and keep all those heroes of the Rebbe. I will just mention, before we get into the actual halachas, that the Rebbe, one of the specific heroes the Rebbe gave for the 9 days was that on Erev Rosh Chodesh Av we should give tzedakah the amount of food, that the amount that it costs us to eat 2 meals, matov 3 meals. Over here in America, most people eat 3 meals a day. Some people eat even more than that. So we should give tzedakah on Erev Rosh Chodesh Av before Chodesh Av comes in. How much it costs us to pay for, I don't know, some people eat in the restaurant, some people eat just cereal and milk and basic sandwiches, tuna fish sandwiches, just for one day, yeah, for Erev Tishrov. That was what Hira of the Rebbe asked every single year to publicize this Hira again. Moving on to the halachos of the 9 days. So I might repeat one or two things that we said last week. I want to keep this a standalone shir. There's some things that are negeya. So if you heard it last week, chazara doesn't hurt. I heard it also. B'chlal, when it comes to the halachos of the 3 weeks and the 9 days, as we know in halacha, there are various tkufas. There's the 3 weeks, there's the 9 days, there's the week of Tishrov, there's Erev Tishrov, and there's Tishrov. Perhaps you could compare it to what we have in Avelos. We have, over there works the other way around. There's an oinen, the day when the person passes away before he's buried, where the relatives have one level of mourning. And then at the morning, over there works the other way around, decreases in mourning. After the burial, there's the Shiva. After the Shiva, there's the Shloshim. And after the Shloshim is the entire first year. So the people actually try to match it up, but we're not going to try to do that right now and see which periods of the 9 days and the 3 weeks, which matches up to which category in Avelis. But over there it works that it goes down and down, and over here, as we get closer and closer to Tishrov, the level of Avelis increases. So one of those categories are the week of Tishrov. Ashkenazim are not very well aware that there's such a classification called the week of Tishrov, because in almost all halachas that apply in the week of Tishrov, we keep them the 9 days also. Sfardim stick to the original halacha, where in the original halacha there's a major distinction that the Gemara, this is the Gemara already tells, it's not a question of a minig, that is halachas that apply in the week of Tishrov. Ashkenazim have extended many of those things to the 9 days, some Sfardim too, some Sfardim yes, some Sfardim not, Yemenites, depends on different communities, have different cultures and traditions about that. But the week of Tishrov actually is already mentioned in the Gemara. A lot of things that you can't do, haircuts, laundry, all those things I mentioned in the Gemara. Like we don't do haircuts for the 3 weeks, for example, even though it doesn't say that in the Gemara. And here comes the big question, what happens this year? Is there a week of Tishrov? Is there no week of Tishrov? So we touched a bit about this last week, but this week it's much more relevant to this week's shir. Because this year Tishrov falls out on Shabbos, and the fast gets delayed to Sunday. So if the fast is delayed to Sunday, that means the week of Tishrov is that Sunday. Or no, only the fast is delayed. But Tishrov remains. And therefore the week of Tishrov is the whole entire week before the Shabbos Tishrov, next week Shabbos. Which has to do with how you learn Pshat and when Chazal pushed off the fast. Did Chazal originally rule that whenever it's on Shabbos it's going to be on Sunday? Does Sunday become the real time for the fast? Or Sunday is like a tashlumin? It's supposed to be on Shabbos. We can't, so we make up for it on a Sunday. And there's a lot of nafkaminas from this Laundered. I don't want to go into Laundered right now. A child who becomes bar mitzvah on the 10th of Av. Sunday the 10th of Av. So if you say that the fast was established to be on the 10th of Av, so of course he has an obligation to fast like everybody else. But if the fast was established for Tisha B'Av, it was just we're making up for it, he didn't have to fast on Tisha B'Av because he wasn't bar mitzvah yet. So he doesn't have to make up for something that he never did wrong. That's one of the differences. So this is a question. There's no such thing as 3 fast, but let's not discuss that right now. That's a myth, straight out myth. But even if it wouldn't be a myth, we're talking about the strict halacha right now. So getting back to the subject at hand, how do we define the week of Tishrov? That has bearing for Ashkenazim only on a few small halachas, where there's a handful of halachas where there's a distinction between the week of Tishrov and the 9 days. So in Shulchan Aruch, as usual, there are 2 opinions about this. Does this coming week have the halacha, the status of the week of Tishrov? And the resolution is that strictly speaking, it is not the week of Tishrov. But the custom is to be stringent and treat it like the week of Tishrov. Now, what difference does it make if it's the strict halacha or a custom? Because any of those things, which to begin with are not really usher, it's only a custom. So in a year like this, we won't mind about it because the whole week of Tishrov doesn't really apply, also only due to custom. You follow the logic? So anything which you're not allowed to do in the week of Tisha B'Av, we're stringent this year and we don't do it the entire week before Tisha B'Av. all those things which is accustomed to be stringent the week of Tishrov, this year to keep a custom to do the week of Tishrov the week early, which was to begin with only a custom, we're not makbid. I'll give you one example. I don't want to go into all the halachas. One example. We all know that Rebbe encouraged very much to make siyumim. Non-stop, as much siyum as possible. Including on Tisha B'Av, including on Shabbos. Even though Shabbos, why do you need a siyum for? Shabbos is a happy day. Whatever, the Rebbe encouraged it very, very much. Now, the halach is if there's a siyum, you're allowed to eat meat and drink wine in the 9 days, the week of Tisha B'Av. But here comes, there's a lot of catches to this. I'll start from another angle because there's a common talk about myths. There's a common myth out there that there's a Chabad custom that we don't eat meat at a siyum in the 9 days. And we have a Sefer Menhagim which lists all the Chabad customs. There's no such custom mentioned anywhere in Sefer Menhagim, nor in any other Sikha of the Rebbe. But things have sometimes a minor difference in the packaging makes a big difference. The custom is that the Rebbe Rashab would make a siyum even though he didn't have meat and wine. Okay? Not that we don't eat meat and wine when there's a siyum. We make a siyum even when we don't have meat and wine. Now let's go back to the root. Where did this come from? So by the Polish Chassidim, they had a big deal about making siyumim in the 9 days with the purpose of eating meat. That was the purpose. And why did they want to eat meat? Not because they were balataiva, because they felt it's in special Indian to transform the same principles that we hear from the Rebbe many times, to transform the 9 days into happy days. And therefore we can go and eat meat and drink wine and make it into a proper simcha. Al pitoy, that's the right thing to do. And this is brought from many Talmidei Baal Shem Tov. There was no such Chabad tradition until we heard from the Rebbe about this. What happened was that the Rebbe Rashab, due to health reasons, had to eat meat. He had to eat meat in the 9 days also. So according to halach, if a person for health reasons needs to eat meat, there's a large amount of room for leniency. But the Rebbe Rashab is not looking to get off the hook. And therefore he made sure to make a siyum. Because he wanted to do it in the right way. Here comes the catch. The Rebbe said, but he didn't want to make the Torah a kardam lachberba. He didn't want to make Torah something which we use out in order to be able to have meat. So what did he do? He made sure to make siyumim even on days when he didn't eat meat. So some days he made a siyum and he ate meat, but he continued making siyum even on other days, so it shouldn't be perceived, he shouldn't use out the siyum only for meat. So I'm not making siyum all the time. No, there's nobody like the Rebbe who takes a story of the Rebbe Rashab, makes it into a lesson for the whole entire Klal Yisrael. So now the Rebbe pushed us into a lesson. Therefore, it's our inning. We should make siyum as much as possible. Whether you eat meat, you don't eat meat, just make siyum, because we learn this from the Rebbe Rashab, and we find by the Polish Rebbes, the Rebbe quotes us all the time. They used to make siyum all the time. So the Rebbe pushed the agenda of siyum in the Lameds in the 1970s. The Rebbe pushed us very much, and from there onwards, till then there was no such thing in Chabad to make siyum. Again, that doesn't mean we're not allowed to eat meat. It means the agenda is siyum. The agenda is not meat. Now, if it's a real, genuine siyum, and there's no real, you're not doing it for the meat, it's a real siyum, and there's nothing wrong with the siyum and nothing wrong with the people that were invited. There's nothing wrong essentially with eating meat. That's straightforward in Shulchan Aruch. There's no Chabad custom that goes against Shulchan Aruch, to the best of my knowledge. But there's restrictions, what's called a siyum, what's not called a siyum, and there's so many rules about it. For example, the many places can say, you're not allowed to rush or delay the siyum, so to come at punkt in the 9 days. There are places that say that. There's also restrictions about who you invite. First of all, many people make a siyum, they never learned to Masechta, but that's not a discussion. Whatever, they just went through it, they have no idea what they did. So if it's a real siyum and it wasn't scheduled for the 9 days, it's a real, genuine siyum. The second thing we have to talk about is who you're inviting. All of a sudden, the whole entire Klal Yisrael became your friends. Because, we have a chance to eat meat. I had a child who had to travel yesterday to the Catskills last night, 2 hours one way and then 2 hours back. So he asked me if he's allowed to hear music, listen to music while he's driving during the night. He drove throughout the entire night. So I told him, no, you're not allowed to hear music. You must listen to music. I don't let you drive without listening to music. It's partially dangerous because I want him to be, it's a safety issue. If he's going to listen to music, he's going to stay up. And even as it was, my daughter, which was in the car, started getting worried. And he's a bit tired and there were a lot of deers on the way. And we had to, people from the family kept on calling in just to keep him awake. So he made a comment. He said, who wants to hear music? We have a heter for music if you come with me in the car. He wants someone to come along with him. So, come with me in the car, you'll be able to hear music. So all of a sudden, yeah, everybody's coming to the sim. Everybody's your buddy, everybody's your friend. These are people that you would normally not even invite. So in halacha, there are restrictions who you can invite to such a sim. You can't just invite everyone. So there are poskim that mention that there are places where they made a minhag that for siyum they didn't serve meat to begin with. They shouldn't have to make an issue who comes and who doesn't come. V'kol haba baruch haba. And everybody's welcome. If you're serving fish and you're serving rice, it's open for anybody could come. So there also are halachic restrictions about who could come to the sim, who can't come to the sim, what's called a sim, what's not called a sim. But let's say it would be a real sim and a person was learning Rambam, and today, a couple of years ago, we finished Rambam in the 9 days. Wasn't planned for, nobody was planning to be able to eat meat. And a person really learns Rambam every day. And this is his shir in which they're learning Rambam. So of course you should make a sim. You should make it with meat also. I'm not doing anything unusual. So here there comes the halacha that in the week of Tishrov it says you can't just invite. There's a restriction on inviting is only a minyan and close relatives. That's for the week of Tishrov. You can't just invite other people. If it's in the 9 days, but not the week of Tishrov, you can invite other people that would normally come. But the week of Tishrov, the restriction's a bit tighter. For a siyum with meat, obviously, we're talking about, only if it's kroivim hapsulim le'edus, relatives which are not kosher to be edus for you, because they're close relatives, and a minyan. So now, this year, which one is the week of Tishrov? This is, I said I'm going to give you just one example, but the example took some time to explain. So the Magen Avram says, this thing that we only invite certain people in the week of Tisha B'Av and other people we don't invite, this whole restriction isn't strictly found in the Gemara. It's a custom that developed. And when it comes to this custom, in a year like this, we don't have to be so particular and worry about the week of Tisha B'Av the week before, because it's actually not the week of Tisha B'Av. So therefore, we don't care about what's the week of Tisha B'Av, not the week of Tisha B'Av. We're only going to worry about it on the following week, which is anyhow Tisha B'Av. That's an example where the week of Tisha B'Av does not apply this year. In some things it does, something it doesn't, but in most things it has no relevance for us, because in most things we treat all the 9 days like the week of Tisha B'Av. Now, having said that introduction, let's go to a number of actual halachas. One of the things that the Gemara says applies already from Rish Chodesh Av, Mishanichnas Av, it's a Mishnah, Mematim B'Simcha. When Av comes in, everybody knows Mishanichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, that's in the Gemara. The same way the Mishnah says that when Av comes in, you decrease happiness, says the Gemara, so too when Adar comes, we increase happiness. And the Rebbe explains, hey, that's not very nice about Adar when you're comparing it to Av. When we're talking in the month of Adar, we're saying it's like in the month of Av. So the Rebbe tells us, Chassidish Pshat, it's fakir, that the minimizing of the Simcha in Av is all for the purpose of Adar. To be able to transform the negativity into light, it all increases the Simcha in Adar. And there's a famous joke, they say, that what's the definition of which day is the happiest day, which day is the saddest day? It's very simple. You start increasing Simcha when the month of Adar comes. You go up and up and up, and never told you to stop. So you keep it going higher and higher and higher until Rish Chodesh Av. Rish Chodesh Av is the happiest day in the year. Then you go down. So Rish Chodesh Av ends up being happier than Rish Chodesh Av. This is a joke that goes on. Obviously, that's not pshat in the Gemara. And the Mishnah says that we decrease in Simcha in the month of Av. It is a Chassidish pshat. The Rebbe quotes it many times. The Rebbe quotes in the name of the Munkatcher Rebbe. The Munkatcher, I haven't seen it in the Munkatcher Svarim. I saw it in other Svarim, but the Rebbe quotes in the name of the Munkatcher, Chassidish Taich. Mamatim B'Simcha means we decrease all negativity via the medium of Simcha. Obviously, that's not the simple meaning, and that's not what the halacha is. Now, there's no such thing as a Chassidish pshat that contradicts the halacha. The halacha is we're supposed to decrease in Simcha. Not we're supposed to add Simcha. So how does Chassidus come and undermine the Shulchan Aruch? And this is Misnagdim, this is fodder for Misnagdim to have a lot to complain about Chassidim. So obviously we're talking about two different types of simcha. There's simcha which is minimized according to Shulchan Aruch, and there's simcha which according to Shulchan Aruch is supposed to be increased. The simcha of Avodas Hashem is supposed to be as strong as always, if not more. The simcha in Gashmis matters, that we should cut down on. And since we believe the ultimate simcha comes from Kedusha and Torah and Elokus, so really in the month of Av we're really going to be very, very happy because we're decreasing in the Gashmis the simcha. There's already a Sefer Tur Barekas, which is a Talmud from the Gure Harizal, from the Harizal group. An individual by the name of Reb Chaim HaKohen. It's a Talmud of Reb Chaim Vital. He was in that class. The Tur Barekas is a Pirush in Shulchan Aruch, and he writes, obviously, Mematim B'Simcha does not apply to Avodas Hashem. Because the Ikra Avodas Hashem is always B'Simcha. You mechuyev to serve Hashem B'Simcha. We're not told we're supposed to cut out on serving the Eibishter. So Torah, Tefillah, we're supposed to daven with Simcha, we're supposed to learn with Simcha. But in those things that it says we're not supposed to be doing, that is the Shulchan Aruch tells us, gives us the guidance. So one of the examples of decreasing in Simcha is Maso Matnashal Simcha, business, happy business. Not too many people are aware of such a halacha. You're supposed to cut down on your business in the month of Av. And the reason for that is because the person said that nowadays we're very lenient about this halacha about cutting out on business. Because nowadays all the business that we do is considered parnasa. We don't do business just pleasure business. Mention nothing parnasa. We're in Gullus. We're stuck. We have difficult times. And today's day and age has been accepted to be lenient about the halachas of business of simcha. But building of simcha and purchases of simcha, not business, and planting of simcha, that's actually mentioned. That's part of what Mamatim Simcha is. That starts from the beginning of Av. So building of simcha is nice painting, nice expansion, renovations. So if a person is building not because he needs a dwelling place, but what's called harvacha ba'alma, he wants to expand. That he's not supposed to be doing. Painting a home. So yesterday someone asked me that pieces are falling down from their roof, and if it's because it's not being painted for who knows how many years. Now that's not called painting shel simcha. That's called painting. You shouldn't have things that fall down on top of your head, which is not safe. And wallpaper on the wall, that's not necessary. Maybe today's day and age it's considered necessary, but it's still harvacha ba'alma. There's a custom that's mentioned in some place when some people had a custom, they wouldn't rinse the floor, mop the floor in the 9 days. They consider that also some form of simcha. Al Pidin, there's no problem with doing that. Al Pidin, there's no problem doing the week of Tishrov. Certainly, if it's done for Shabbos, there wasn't even a minhag for that. Certainly, if the floor is stained, there was no minhag for that either. But it was like cutting out and doing things to make it fancy. I guess people who would mop the floor, maybe, it was an occasion they would go and mop the floor. So, we're not going to do in the month of Av. One thing which makes sense, which person can say you shouldn't do, is shining the floor. Shining the floor is clearly done l'tainug. It's not a necessity. That's like tzir v'kiyur. That's like painting, making nice engravings in the wall. So we don't shine the floor and waxing the floor, but that's the kind of thing we don't do in the 9 days. Putting down a new carpet, buying a new carpet. So when it comes to renovations, you need to know this is renovations which is people need. In Eretz Yisrael, the Poskim realize there's a major, major problem with apartments for Yungalite. There's a real estate crisis. So therefore, a lot of Poskim in Eretz Yisrael are extremely lenient to build buildings for Yungalite because they need to have where to live. They first have nowhere to live. So that's not called Harvacha Balma. Then you have a place to live. It's not called Binyan Shel Simcha. But some to do renovations in a house, which usually we know that the style, the way it's done in our community, often the renovation is because you want to expand, you have a bigger kitchen and a nicer kitchen, and you need to have an aisle and a breakfast bar and all those kind of things. That's just extra kind of stuff. Extra kind of stuff you don't do in the 9 days. If a person got a contractor, and the goyish contractor started already before the 9 days, this doesn't apply to everything. It's not everything you started before the 9 days is allowed to continue. So since the guy is a contractor actually is considered that he's working for himself. There's a day worker who gets paid for the job. That means he's working for you. A contractor, he has a job to do, and you pay him a set amount for the job. So you have a goyish contractor, he's allowed to continue working in the 9 days. Same if you have a goyish contractor who's painting the home. Also, in theory, you'd be allowed to, but over here, the poskim say that if you go to the guy and you can ask him, you know what, here's a couple of dollars. Do me a favor, wait another few days. You should really try to do that. Tav of brach if you do it, because it's not appropriate to paint the home in the 9 days. Shuls, we have no problem building and painting. Putting up a fence, which is a sakana, it's a mitzvah actually, to put up a fence. No problem even on Tishrov. A wall which is about to fall, even if it wouldn't be sakana. I don't know how it's possible to have a wall which is about to fall, which won't be sakana. And even if it's simcha, for some reason to fix up this wall, but since the person's going to have a loss of money, because if a wall falls, he has to pay a lot of money to fix it up. So that's also, he's not doing it for simcha, he's doing it to not lose money. Planting trees for shade, for beauty, flowers, all those kind of things. That's not appropriate. That's called binyan shel netiyah shel simcha. There's nothing wrong with buying flowers. People that buy flowers for Shabbos, especially if they do this every single week, there's nothing wrong with buying flowers. But planting of simcha is a problem. Purchases which are simcha. What's purchases of simcha? So we said business is not a problem, but we do it for parnasa. So if business is not a problem, if a person needs a car for business, because that's the only means that he could do for transportation, so he's allowed to buy a car. But he's buying a car for his home, actually it's much more serious. Because that's not considered, that's not part of the parnas. It's something, it's an extra thing to have. You don't have to have a car. So you really shouldn't do that in the 9 days. Buying spoons, forks, that's considered basic usage. Buying silver dishes, buying chashva things for the house, fancy chashva furniture, those are the kind of things you shouldn't be buying in the 9 days. New clothing, obviously, you're not allowed to buy. Now, we know about this not buying new clothing in the 3 weeks. When the 3 weeks is purely a minig. And not everybody has accepted that minig. When it comes to the 9 days, that's part of the mission of Mamatim B'Simcha. It's already much more serious. And therefore, we're not, even if there's a sale, all those kind of things, you're not supposed to buy clothing in the 9 days unless it's for a mitzvah like a new pair of tefillin, not a new talis, because a talis is a garment. Tefillin is not a garment. Tefillin is a mitzvah item. A talis or talis cotton is a garment. You really shouldn't be buying it in the 9 days. I'm not talking about if a person's talis is ripped and he doesn't have another talis and he can't borrow a talis from someone else, or he's sensitive to other people and he can't really wear someone else's talis. I'm not talking about that. A question my grandfather asks in his sefer, and a lot of contemporary poets can talk about this. This comes up every single year. People who don't have sneakers for Tishrov. So they're buying for Tishrov. And of course they wake up in the middle of the 9 days. You're not supposed to buy, it says clearly, min olam chadashim. So over here the poskim are lenient that if he's buying it purely for avelus purposes, and he's not going to wear it in the 9 days, he's only going to wear it on Tishrov, and he has no other sneakers, then there's an exception, he could buy sneakers in the 9 days. This all falls under the category of mematim b'simcha. This is all, like I said, mentioned in the Mishnah. Then there's things that the Gemara tells us that in the week of Tisha B'Av, the things that are forbidden, and one of the things that it talks about in the Gemara is laundry. Our custom has been to take this Gemara about laundry and extend it all the way to the whole entire 9 days. Sfardim are not so particular about that. So, let's talk about laundry. The halacha is that a person is not allowed to do laundry in the 9 days, even if he's doing it for after the 9 days. Even if he's traveling. A lot of people quote this heter that if you're traveling after Tisha B'Av, then you're allowed to do laundry in the 9 days. The only thing is, but they didn't realize that this is a heter, which is, first of all, a questionable heter. And according to the Eli Rabba, another place, even then, you only through a guy could do laundry. But the other very important thing is they're talking about in a situation in those days where you traveled somewhere, you have nowhere you could do laundry. Nowadays, there's no such thing that you came to a location where you can't do laundry. There's almost no location which doesn't have a laundromat or a washing machine or something. Say you don't have a washing machine in your house. Okay, so you have to go somewhere else. It's very hard to rely on that heter nowadays. So laundries should not be done in the 9 days, whether you're going to wear it now or later. Not even giving a garment to the cleaners, which they don't use actual water. I don't know what they use. It doesn't only apply to clothing. It applies to tablecloths. It applies to towels. It applies to all kinds of things. It applies to your clothing or to clothing of a guy. It applies to giving you clothing to a goyish cleaner, to a goyish laundromat. You're allowed to give to a goyish laundromat before the 9 days, even if she's going to end up doing it in the 9 days. Applies to a sheitel. A sheitel is a garment. A sheitel is not here. Now, since in the sheitel is more room for leniency based on a number of different factors, which I'm not going to go into, but in the week of Tisha B'Av, where it's usher to actually do laundry, it's not just a minig, then even a shaitel should not be done. One of the advantages of a shaitel over other garments is, besides the fact that it's not for beauty, it's for tznius and all that, is there's a special halacha called misha ein lo el chaluk echad. Somebody stuck with only one garment. I don't know what that means today's day and age. Misha ein lo chaluk echad means that today's day and age, a woman opens her wardrobe and she says, and she's full of clothing, she says, I have nothing to wear. Like men open the fridge, which is a stacked fridge, and they say, I have nothing to eat over here. So I don't know what that means. There's nothing, ein le'el chaluk echad today's day and age. I never met such kind of people, but in Shulchan Aruch there's such a concept, ein le'el chaluk echad. So much so that the person can talk about when a person washes laundry, when ein le'el chaluk echad, there's a condition mentioned in the Gemara, it's questionable if it's halacha or not, that when a person is washing laundry and he only has one cloak, one robe, you can actually see that he has only one robe, because he's wearing a special belt. Because he doesn't have what to wear, right, while he's doing his laundry. So his belt that he's wearing right now is indicating, everybody sees, no one is going to think that you're allowed to do, the Gemara talks about Chalamoid, that you're allowed to do laundry in Chalamoid. Because they see that he has no clothing. They see he doesn't even have what to wear while he's doing his laundry. So we're talking about a case where really the guy has only one piece of clothing. So, ein le'el chaluk echad, the halacha is, sit tight. Sit right now, I think you should hold on tight to your chairs. Even misha ein le'el chaluk echad is not allowed to do laundry the week of Tishrov. Straightforward Gemara. It's not a minig, it's not a chumrah. Even if ein le'el chaluk echad. Now the person can say, yeah, but we're not that machmin the whole 9 days. Since this is a crazy situation, we has only one piece of article of clothing, I'm going to talk the practical relevance of this. So therefore, we don't, the 9 days, the halacha of washing clothing only applies in the strict halacha is only the week of Tishrov. Sfardim only keep it in the week of Tishrov. So a person has only one article of clothing, to be machmer on him the whole entire days, we're not going to be so machmer. So now let me go back to the shaitel. A shaitel is a classic example of ein le'el chaluk echad. Now there's some women that have 10 shaitel, I agree. But often a shaitel could be a woman has only one shaitel. And the shaitel needs a wash. She has only one cloak, one garment. She has many other garments, but on the head, she only has one garment. So in this case, to wash a shaitel before the week of Tishrov, there's wiggle room. When it comes the week of Tishrov, that's going to be much harder to be allowed to wash a shaitel, even if you have only one garment, you're not allowed to do in the week of Tishrov. And because this is a halacha, not just a minig, that even this year, which is not really the week of Tishrov, you shouldn't be washing the shaitel the entire week before Tishrov. That doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to setting a shaitel, to combing a shaitel, to shortening the shaitel. It doesn't apply to any of that. I'm talking about physically washing. Now, I'm going to talk soon about what do you do if Mama Shiva is stuck with clothes. I'm going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to go to Seder over here. I'm soon as you wanted to ask me about. Everybody's going to ask that question. Washing clothing is not a problem if you're doing it because you don't want to lose money or lose clothing. For example, somebody called me tonight. They have bed bugs all over, having exterminator coming to the house. Exterminated have to be out of the house for 2 days. It's a serious issue. And after 2 days, they have to wash all their laundry. Not the laundry, but all their linen. They're allowed to wash in the 9. That was their question, allowed to wash in the 9 days. Washing if there's to avoid mold. This is the whole issue of washing because hes chadas mavil, you're taking your mind off mourning. But here you're washing purely because you don't want to lose your linen and lose your clothing. For kids, so although the minig is that we don't wash clothing for kids, if the kids that soil their clothing all the time, which is approximately till about 6 years old, that's no problem whatsoever. But over 6, the minig is that we don't wash their clothing, but there's a lot of room for leniency, and that's only a minig. There's a lot of room for leniency, particularly this year, where there's no real week of Tishrov. Again, I'm talking about washing for kids. They need to have clothing right now. I'm not talking about you washing because you want to have after Tishrov. The same way we're not allowed to wash clothing, we're also not allowed to put on freshly laundered clothing. Freshly laundered clothing means that you didn't wear before the 9 days. If you wore it once before the 9 days, that's not freshly laundered. Now, this is something which is relevant for tonight and tomorrow. because there's halacha, they're not allowed to wear freshly laundered clothing. It's halacha straight from the Gemara, and the Gemara doesn't say the 9 days. The Gemara says the week of Tishrov, but how many is the entire 9 days? So the place can bring in Eitzah Tova. If you're living in a place which is a hot place, you're not one of those people that are going to be sticking to the same clothing for 9 days straight. And this year, 10 days. So they give you an eitzah, you could put on all those clothing before the 9 days begin. Which clothing are we talking about? So the minig is that when it comes to clothing which is made purely to absorb sweat, like undergarments, socks, especially nowadays that everybody's an istness, nobody's going to stick to the same undergarments for 10 days. There's no such thing. I know of a particular individual, not that does it all the time, that in 9 days was very, very machmer, a chassid of here in the shchuna, everybody knew about it. Now, we're very, very maker when it comes to garments of undergarments. That's not considered a simcha, that's not what's included when the Shulchan Aruch talks about laundering clothing, but shirts, pants, suits, how much more so dresses, those kind of things. The eitzah is to put them all on before the 9 days begin. I'll talk in a second how you do that exactly. Now, I see you're not only you, but everybody here is desperate to find out what I said before. That if you only have one garment, the halacha is that you're allowed to wash it and wear it, but not in the week of Tishrov. Which means in this year, since this is halacha, then even this year, the whole entire week before Tishrov, if a person has only one garment, he's not allowed to wash it. Which means all those garments became sold, you're not allowed to. That's the halacha. Now, I'm talking about that, right? So if you're talking about washing a stain is not called washing clothing. An isolated stain, especially if it's obvious and it's ugly and it's covered abris, you have a stain on the garment, you want to wash that individual stain, that's not a problem. But here we're talking about, well, there's no stain in it, it's just not comfortable to wear the same undergarment or even overgarments, shirts, every day, one after another. So, again, the strict halacha is you're not allowed to. So what do you feel allowed to? You just don't wash it. That's the halacha. In a case where a person is not just uncomfortable, but there's extreme tsar, for example, undergarments, or even overgarments where it's pushed embarrassing to walk like that in the street because it's obvious what's going on over here. In this case, there's a heter to wash mamash the bare minimum. So now I'm making a distinction between just the plain principle of ein le'elech chaluk echad, which that's not a heter, or where it becomes a serious issue of kavod abrius or tsar gadol. Uncomfortable is not a heter. I always wash every single day. Tough. Well, that's what the 9 days are about. That was a bit of English that we lost, and there's things that we lose out because of that. And we have to know that the big deal that I won't be able to wash my clothing is like when I tell people when you're going camping for 3 days and there's no place to do laundry and there's no place to do showers. What do you do then? Because for the thrill of camping, we do that, right? And the thrill, or the hepecha thrill, of Beis Elokeinu, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, okay, but we don't take it that seriously because that happened 1900 years ago and doesn't affect us on a day-to-day life. But if a person is mizbun and meditates and contemplates the fact that the Beis Hamikdash was being destroyed right now, this very moment, like the famous Sikh where the Rebbe says that even a person with a heart of stone would feel that, then all of a sudden, big deal. I do have what to change. I don't know what to change. Like, person is in a stressed out situation, when there's a real crazy situation, he doesn't even care about these things. Until it becomes unbearable and it's not fair to people around you. Okay, that's a whole different story. So when it comes to such a situation, then if it's undergarments, the best thing is actually not to wash. The best thing is to buy new undergarments, because buying new clothing with undergarments is not really considered a simcha. It's not like clothing. But since you're now allowed to wear freshly laundered or new clothing, so the only eitzah we have of it, and you're stuck, it's in the middle of the 9 days. So there is the trick of putting it on the floor, which normally that's not ideal, but if the guy is stuck. So he'll buy new undergarments, put on the floor. When I say the floor, I don't mean on the carpet. I don't mean inside the house, I mean on the actual floor, on the earth. That's considered putting on the floor. And that's the best thing to do. If you can't buy new clothing, Pashas know what to buy new clothing, so let him just wash mamash what he needs and put it on the floor. When it comes to overgarments, over there buying is a much more serious issue. So we let him wash the one garment that he needs, the one garment. Something which has been in between undergarments and overgarments is a shirt. A shirt is like in between, because a shirt does absorb a lot of sweat, but it's not a garment which is purely for sweat. It's not like a suit. So over there, if a person, whatever the bare minimum mamish the person needs, again, strictly speaking, you're not allowed to wash even if you only one garment. But if it's mamish, you can't go around like that. Let him wash what he needs, put it on the floor, and rely on that. I was saying before, so the way to avoid all of these problems is before the 9 days to prepare the clothing before. Now, what are you supposed to do tonight and tomorrow to prepare before the 9 days? You put it on. How long do you put it on? What do you do? So the only thing that we really have to worry about is the shirts. That's the biggest issue. It's not undergarments. We said there's no problem to wear freshly laundered undergarments. The problem is washing, right? There's no problem wearing undergarments. Those who want to be machmer, some people are machmer even with undergarments, and they put them all on before the 9 days. That's like a bit extreme. If you want to be machmer, say the week of Tishrov, you should be machmer about it before the week of Tishrov. And this year, you don't even have to be machmer that also. You want to be machmer, put them on the floor. So you don't have to do the whole thing of putting on every single pair of socks and every single undershirt and every single pair of underwear. Because the minig is that we only care about overgarments. Not laundering, I'm talking about wearing freshly laundered. So how long do you put on your shirt for? It's hard to give a number of it on it. The Shach writes in Hilchos Avelis, over there the halach is about an oval who wants to put on a shirt. So he gives it to someone else to wear for a short while. Tishrov, we can't do that because everybody's available. But an oval could give it to someone else to wear. Another person wears it for a short while, and he gives it to you. How much is that short while? So the Shach says Shah Achas. And then he says Shah Achas Lav Dafka. Shah Achas means an hour, but it doesn't mean an hour on the clock. It means a considerable amount of time. So how much, Rabbi? How much is the considerable amount of time? The considerable amount of time is the amount of time that it takes that it won't have the pleasure of something which is freshly laundered. I can't give you a number, but it's worn. It doesn't feel like something that wasn't worn. Or I'll phrase it differently, something that you would mind if someone else wore it before you for that amount of time. So if somebody puts on something for a second, most people don't mind. But if you wear it for a while and you start feeling that you wore it, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, it's hard to give an exact number in it, that's considered that was worn before. By the way, some place give an interesting eitzah, and they say like this. Sfardim keep these halachas only the week of Tishrov. Ashkenazim keep it the 9 days. So instead of putting on all your clothing, give it to a Sfardi to wear before the week of Tishrov. Because he could put it on. But instead of bothering someone else, just be prepared in advance, and you could do it on Erev Rosh Chodesh. Tonight and tomorrow, yeah, not tomorrow night. Tonight and tomorrow day. L'kavod Shabbos, this does not apply. L'kavod Shabbos, you're allowed to put on like every Shabbos, including Shabbos Chazon. You put a lot of put on freshly laundered clothing now, meaning is to wear dafke big Shabbos. Not like the Ashkenazim, who are the non-Hasidim, who they don't wear the Shabbos clothing. Not new clothing, laundered clothing. New clothing you're not allowed to wear even on Shabbos. And we put a freshly laundered tablecloth on the table, but that doesn't give us a license to put on freshly laundered linen for Shabbos. That is no heter for that. Freshly laundered tablecloth, freshly laundered clothing, that you're allowed to do for Shabbos. Some people, by the way, suggest that's an eitzah also if somebody didn't prepare well enough in advance, so he could use out the Shabbos for that. Friday night, one shirt, Shabbos day, another shirt, and slowly. So it's supposed to be obvious in such a way that it's not considered preparing for the weekday. So if he's going to put on a blue shirt on Shabbos, because he wants to prepare all his clothing for the 9 days, then it's going to be obviously preparing for the weekday. Or if he's going to put on his thing and say, oh, this, have a good chat. I could do it now and do it later. The minute you're saying it, you're going to make it obvious that you're preparing for the weekday. If you don't say anything and it doesn't look, people do change their shirt occasionally on a Shabbos, and he puts on a shirt Friday night, and then after the meal puts on another one, on Shabbos morning, and he comes back from the February and another one. So you could work with the Shabbos in between, gives you a bit of leeway, but really it will be done before the 9 days begin. One of the other halachas in the 9 days is meat and wine. It's not asim medina gemara, not to eat meat and drink wine. Medina gemara, even erev Tishba, you're allowed to eat meat and drink wine, unless it's the actual suda mafsekes. But this became an established isser, and the poskim write that somebody who eats meat and drinks wine in the 9 days, or in those places where they keep this meaning in the week of Tishrov, Poiretz Geder Shel Rishonim, he's breaching a fence which was made by the early authorities. Upoiretz Geder Yishchenu Nachash, somebody who breaches a fence, a snake comes and bites him. A snake means there's a rabbinic curse on people that play and try to breach minhagim because they say, oh, it's only a minig. So it's a very serious minig. When we talk about this minig of not eating meat, that includes chicken, that includes things that were cooked with meat, not something that's cooked in a pot of meat, in response to the question that was asked before about the, what do you call those things in the back? Sternos. So do we have to change the sternos? We have to change the wires. You could even keep the same exact tray. You're allowed to use a pot that was a fleshig pot, even if it was used that day for fleshigs. That's not a problem. But food that was cooked with flesh, even if you have onions that were cut with a fleshig knife, which when Basta B'chalav were particular about this, but not for the halachos of the 9 days. That's not considered fleshig for the purpose of the 9 days. Kids is a different story. Kids under 6 we're not machmer. Wine also we don't drink, and that includes grape juice, and includes food that has wine in it. But it doesn't include mashka, mazel, and it doesn't include beer, it doesn't include anything which doesn't have wine in it. Now, when it comes to benching, since we're not so machmer during the year always to do kosher bracha dafka on wine, dafka to do kosher bracha, so therefore you can't all of a sudden be holy and all of a sudden you need to have wine because it's a mitzvah for kosher bracha, because you don't always do kosher bracha. Even if you do it always when you have a mezuman. Because if you really hold that kosher bracha is a necessity, you would have to do it even when you bench privately. So we obviously don't hold kosher bracha as a necessity, and therefore we don't bench on a kos, or you give it to a child. When it comes to Havdalah, so that's what we do. When it comes to Havdalah, we give it to a child. We don't drink the wine, we give it to a child. Now the child has to be a child that is the age of chinuch. Chinuch for brachas, number one, because he's being yotz with my bracha very priagafen. Chinuch for Havdalah. Because if a person's not the age of being Yaitza Havdalah, I can't have him drink the wine of Havdalah and through that me being Yaitza. But he's not yet chinuch for Avelis. He's not old enough, he's not mature enough to mourn in Yerushalayim. So an older kid who's already almost bar mitzvah, we would assume is already mature for Avelis in Yerushalayim. A younger kid that's a little kid is not even the age of chinuch for Havdalah for bracha. So it's an in-between kind of age. So I often joke and say, people ask me what's the age of chinuch for Avelis in Yerushalayim. I say that unfortunately nowadays many people that are 40 are not immature enough in the of Avelis. But usually it means like a kid normally between about 6 and 11 is normally sort of the age. So that we give it to a child. If there is no child, you just make Havdalah, you drink it yourself. Because really you're allowed to drink the wine for Havdalah because it's wine of a mitzvah. But l'chatchila we give it to a child. Now often what happens is, some people ask the question, my child doesn't like wine. Should I make Havdalah on grape juice? No. Make Havdalah on wine, and if the child doesn't drink wine, you drink it. Because it's only a hiddur to give it to the child, but we're not going to give it to a child, and because of that, cut down on the way you're supposed to make Havdalah properly. The father makes the agafen and he's mighty the child. Now what happens sometimes is, you make the agafen, you tell the child in advance that he should have a mind to be yotza, and then the child starts drinking, and it says he doesn't want to drink. And there goes my bracha. Or he gives up. Not even before he starts. So that's a serious problem, because then you have to make again Bari Pri Hagafen. Because when you made a Bari Pri Hagafen, your intention was for the child, not for you to drink. That's what we call nimlach. So you obviously have to make a new Bari Pri Hagafen. If the child went and you said Bari Pri Hagafen, and then the child went, a lot of kids do that. They make again, because they used to, every time they take a Baruch Hashem, they're trained very well, they make again a Bari Pri Hagafen. Don't start thinking, oh, that means my Bari Pri Hagafen was for nothing, that means I should drink also. No, your Bari Pri Hagafen wasn't for nothing. The child had a problem that he made again Bari Pri Hagafen, but you shouldn't drink the wine. No, it has to be dafka a boy. Woman is a machlekes if they have the mitzvah of Havdalah altogether. So one second, let me just finish the question, answer this question. The machlekes if women have the mitzvah of Havdalah altogether. That's one of the reasons why, if a man made Havdalah already, he's allowed to make Havdalah again for another man. Because there's a concept of arvus that we're responsible for every single yid. So therefore, even if I did a mitzvah myself, I can make a bracha to exempt another person. It's best that he does himself, because the halach is when it comes to a loan, you can always go to the guarantor. But first you're supposed to go to the guy that owes you the money. If he doesn't have money, you go to the guarantor. We're guarantors for all Klal Yisrael. So therefore, I'm allowed to make kiddush for other people, I'm allowed to make havdalah for other people. But first, the person himself is supposed to do it. So if a person can't make kiddush themselves, either because they don't like wine, or because they don't know how to read the kiddush, whatever it is, so I can make kiddush for them, even if I already made kiddush. Same with havdalah. However, a man cannot make havdalah for a woman if he's already made havdalah, because there's a debate whether women have the mitzvah of havdalah altogether. So if a woman makes havdalah herself, no problem. Women do a lot of mitzvahs that are not obligated. Women make a bracha on lulav. They don't even have the mitzvah of lulav. They make a bracha on lulav. They could do that. So whether they're obligated or not obligated, they can make havdalah. That's not a problem. But for me to go make havdalah for a woman, I'm making a bracha for someone, I already heard havdalah. And I can't say because I'm responsible for her, because who says she has a mitzvah altogether? So if I can't make havdalah for a woman once I made havdalah, that's halach that people have to know. When you go to shul, you listen to havdalah, and shul, you can't make again havdalah for your wife. She has to make herself. But, so now back, now back to your question. So if I'm going to make, if I'm going to make havdalah, I want someone else to drink, it has to be someone who has the chiyuv. A child, a male child, has a chiyuv. A female child, to begin with, we don't know if she has a chiyuv. So if it has to be a man. So you can ask me a question?
If you have a son also at home, you could make havdalah for your son and your wife to be yotzi, even though you.
Yeah, you could do it, yeah, because you're doing it for the child. That's fine, that's not a problem.
It's just me and my wife. Motzi Shabbos.
So just you make havdalah, you drink it.
Beer or
No, I said that before. Drink it yourself. Not only that, you don't have to be... No, make on wine. That's what we said before. If you have a child, you give it to a child. You don't have a child, you drink it yourself. You'll not even go to some people say, no, I shouldn't drink that much wine. I have to make sure to drink only the bare minimum. There's no such thing. You make havdalah on wine, you're allowed to drink it. If there's a child, you give it to the child. This is, by the way, particularly relevant this year because Tishrov is delayed to Sunday, and therefore we make havdalah Sunday night. And there's a lot of people that can't fast. And Mr. Shem, no one's going to be fasting this year, but we're talking now the Gullus plan. Part of our Hachanah for Yemei Mashiach is to learn the halachos of Gullus, because when Mashiach comes, the same way we learn now the halachos of Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, they're going to learn all the Gullus halachos. They're going to be like this extreme thing, like today, us Chassidic Chabad, we learn all the halachos that's going to happen at the time of Mashiach. So then it's going to be the extreme thing. We learn all those Gullus halachos, just the theoretical halachos. So we're preparing for that now by already learning now all the Gullus halachos. And having said that, so since the fast is delayed and there are people that can't fast, particularly this year, it's even more lenient about the halachos of fasting. So people who don't fast have to make havdalah. So if a woman is breaking her fast, a woman that's expecting or nursing, whatever it is, which we're very lenient about in a year like this, she has to make havdalah. She has to make havdalah. She has to drink it also. Now, she can't give it to drink to a child because a child can't be yotze havdalah from a woman who says the woman has the mitzvah altogether. So either she drinks it herself, and since it's Tishrov, you shouldn't be drinking wine on Tishrov. You shouldn't be drinking in the 9 days altogether. But on the 9 days, okay, no. But on Tishrov itself to drink wine, therefore the minig is that the people make havdalah make a chamar medina. They make usually on coffee or tea, and if they're making a coffee on Tishrov itself, I'm talking for the people that are going to be eating on Tishrov. So they make havdalah on coffee or tea, and they can drink it themselves. If they're going to be making on wine, because they don't have coffee or tea for whatever reason, then they should give it to a child. But what kind of child? To a female. If a woman is making havdalah, she should give it to a girl, not to a boy. Because the boy can't be yotze havdalah from her, because it can't be yotze havdalah from a woman. Got it?
Women are obligated to time down mitzvahs, so what's the problem there?
The problem is, women on the contrary, women are not obligated in time bound mitzvahs. Yeah. So therefore, they really should not be obligated in havdalah. The reason why havdalah might be different than other all time bound mitzvahs, they're exempt. Havdalah might be different because the halacha, there's a rule that calls yeshna b'shmira, yeshna b'schira, that if you have the halacha of observing Shabbos, you might have the halacha of remembering Shabbos. And therefore, according to one opinion, so Kiddush is considered remembering Shabbos. For sure they have the mitzvah. The question is, do you extend it also to havdalah, to remember Shabbos after Shabbos, because they observe Shabbos also? And that's a machlokes rishonim. And because of machlokes, it remains a suffix until this very, very day. And therefore, some women don't make havdalah for themselves altogether, because they're worried that maybe women don't have the mitzvah. But the Alter Rebbe paskins, women are allowed to make havdalah for themselves. The only problem is when a man makes for them when he did already the mitzvah. By the way, some people suggest that could be the reason why women adopted a custom not to drink from the cup of wine on havdalah. There's this thing that women don't drink from the cup of wine. They even say a joke. Not a joke. It's the thing they say, if a woman drinks, she'll start growing a beard and all that kind of stuff. So where the custom come from? Pashut, because if the woman doesn't have the mitzvah, I'm going to make Avdullah, the woman's going to drink, so they think, women don't drink from it. That became a thing. I'll take one more question, go ahead. So I didn't mention that. When it comes to putting on clothing before the 9 days, no, you're not supposed to be putting a bunch of clothing one on top of each other because it really defeats the purpose. The purpose is it should feel like it was worn. And usually when you're putting 10 shirts at once, it doesn't feel that way. So no, it should be one and then another one and then another one. So yeah, it takes a bit of time, but that's what's supposed to happen. Yeah.
Motzi Shabbos this week you could use one. Sunday night Motzi Havdalah you could also use one.
Sunday night Matzah Shabbos, you should use wine. If there's a child, you give it to a child. Matzah Tishrov Sunday night, according to most places, you don't even have to give it to a child because it's already after Tishrov and after the 10th of Av. You don't even have to give it to a child. I didn't mention a few more things. I don't want to keep people waiting over here. There's halachos about. We didn't talk anything about bathing. People are going to be very happy because we didn't talk anything about showering in the 9 days. I'll mention in mamish very bekitzer. Before we get to that, cutting nails is only a problem of the week of Tishrov. This year, we shouldn't cut nails the entire week before Tishrov, except for L'kavet Shabbos. L'kavet Shabbos meaning Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos. This Erev Shabbos is not a problem. Next Erev Shabbos, not a problem either. Bathing is a very, very controversial topic. I'll mention it very, very briefly. I don't want to go too much over time. In Shulchan Aruch it says, at least for Ashkenazim, that a person is not allowed to wash their body in the 9 days, even with cold water. They're allowed to rinse panav, yadav, raglav, face, hands, feet, head in cold water, or even other organs as long as they're not washing the majority of the body. Now, often I get this question whether during Shiva, usually during Shiva people ask before Shabbos, I want to take a shower for Shabbos. That's when they ask the question. The rest of Shiva, they don't really particularly worry about this halacha. And the answer is, we're not saying you can't wash. All we're saying you can't do the whole body. If you're doing less than the majority of the body, it's not a problem. Really, where's the problem? The problem is because people sweat. That's why people don't like this halacha. That's why it's uncomfortable halacha. But there's certain parts of the body that sweat more than others. So since the halacha is allowed to wash face, hands, feet, head, and as long as it's not the majority of the body, so it's not really the end of the world. Even though we said it has to be in cold water does not mean you have to turn on only the cold water and be freezing and shaking. Cold water means less than the regular temperature the way people normally wash. So it shouldn't be a nice, beautiful, hot, warm shower. It doesn't have to be freezing cold. It's a lukewarm kind of shower, less than normal. That's considered cold in this context. So the problem is for some people that's not satisfying. They don't like what I just now said. They want to take a regular shower. Now, well, the halacha says you're not supposed to take a regular shower. So people say, yeah, I don't know, because those days were different, because it wasn't hot in those days, and people didn't sweat. And today's day and age, you understand, today we take showers every single day, and it must be different. Now, for those who say that, I have some news for you. That the Rabbi Braun, which goes back hundreds of years, writes that a lot of people used to go and wash themselves in the rivers in the 9 days, and even the week of Tishrov. And he says the reason was because the month of Av is very, very hot, and they're full of sweat, and everybody's sensitive to sweat, and therefore they go and shower themselves, but they didn't shower because they didn't have showers, but they wash in the river. And he says, I can't stop these people. If I would have the ability to be moich, I would stop them, because they really shouldn't be doing it. So in those days, they came up with the same exact excuses we come up today. In those days, they worked in the field, and they didn't have air conditioning. Having said that, sometimes it becomes really unbearable. A person is mamish sweating and is not doing it for any other reason other than to get rid of sweat. So like I said before, if it's just to get rid of sweat, take those areas that are sweating, which al pi halach you're allowed to use, wash face, hands, feet, not majority of the body, with cold water or not warm water. Now, if a person feels that he's sweating, it's not coming off of the lukewarm water, so he's allowed to even use hot water. If hot water is physical sweat, it's sweating like crazy, allowed to even use soap. He's doing it purely mishum nekiyas, but a person should realize that he's doing it kefiyah hechler, according to what's necessary, not just becomes a thing that you just take showers on 9 days, the whole halacha doesn't apply. And when we give a heter for a person, it's not to do it in the mikveh. Because a heter, like a person's allowed to eat on Tishrov, shouldn't sit down and shul and eat on Tishrov. In his house, he eats on Tishrov. So if a person, for some reason, he's crazy sweaty, so okay, in his house, he'll wash off those areas, whatever is necessary. certainly a person should change from what their regular practice is, especially in the week of Tishrov, which this year means the week before. And to quote the lashon that I mentioned a few times, "Kedaihu beis Elokeinu," our Beis Hamikdash deserves, they should be treated with some level that there should be. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, of course. So there's a Beis Hamikdash. When it comes to Shiva, people somehow manage with this. When it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, then it's like, it's only Beis Hamikdash. It's not really apparent. So again, if it's necessary, it's necessary. But anything that beyond that which is necessary, a person shouldn't just treat this halacha like just out the window. Going to the mikveh is not a problem. That's considered going for a mitzvah. Going to mikveh is not a problem for a person that goes every single day. A person that doesn't normally go shouldn't go on the 9 days either. And our meaning is we make even a hot mikveh, and we toivel even in a hot mikveh, but we don't sit in the mikveh. You go in and you go out. To sit in the mikveh, so instead of the shower, the mikveh becomes instead of the shower, and you sit there in fabring, because this is a mikveh. If you're going there to sit in fabring, then it's not a mikveh, then it's a shower. And it's actually even worse than a shower. In fact, my grandfather suggests, one of the leniencies he suggests, why people are very lenient with taking showers on Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos, there is a meaning by Chassidim that we take regular showers. And the person can give a lot of explanations. The simple explanation is that the heter for us, Erev Shabbos, is the same heter that they had in the Shulchan Aruch. It says that you're allowed to just wash your head on Erev Shabbos. What was for them, washing their head, is for us a regular shower, because they didn't take showers every Erev Shabbos. They couldn't take a shower every Erev Shabbos. They didn't have that. So they just washed their head. For us, we're doing it for Shabbos, so we can take a full shower. But my grandfather brings an interesting kula, and he says, in the olden days, there was no such thing as showers. So it was going into a bath. No. So this wasn't part of the Isser. The Isser was in a bath, not a shower. It's a very creative kind of heter, but he also only applies in the case where a person's really needs it. He says, okay, so to make it a bit more lenient, he adds this new svara that it's not the same as it used to be. But if a person is going to go into the mikveh and use that as his shower, that's mamish the issur of going into a bath. Right? So that should not be done. And the Eibishter Halachos that all of this is going to be all theoretical halachas, and we should be zeicher to have the gula mitzvah shlema. Remind everyone about the halacha that Rebbe tells us to increase in these days in simcha through learning hilchos beis habchira, giving a lot of tzedakah, learning extra Torah, and doing everything we can to make siyumim and get men, women, and children all to listen to siyumim, and should be zeicher to the goal and have the ultimate. Chassidus tells us the days of these days are higher than all the other days of the year, the biggest days of Yom Tov. So